The EMD-FD was a 1,350 horsepower diesel-electric locomotive produced between March 1939 and November 1945 by General Motors' Electro-Motive division. The F stood for 1,400 horsepower and the T for twin, as it came standard in a 2-unit set. The design was developed from the TAR model built for the C RI&amp in 1937, and was similar in cylinder count, axle count, length and layout. All told 555 cab-equipped A units were built, along with 541 cabless booster B units, for a grand total of 1,096 units. The locomotives were all sold to customers in the United States. It was the first model in EMD's very successful F-unit series of cab-unit freight diesels, and was the locomotive that convinced many U.S. railroads that the diesel-electric freight locomotive was the future. Many rail historians consider the FD one of the most important locomotive models of all time. The first units produced for a customer were built in December of 1940 and January of 1941 for the Atchison, Topeka and Santa Fe Railway, and numbered the 100 set. These were the first diesel-electric locomotives ever produced with dynamic braking, a system developed at the insistence of the railroad and with its assistance. Initially, the 4-unit copper-equipped set featured 2 booster units between 2 cab units in the manner of the demonstrator set. The Brotherhoods of Locomotive Engineers and Firemen, however, insisted that the 2 cabs required 2 crews, so the railway had EMD produce extra boosters and renumbered its earliest sets into 4-unit sets with 1 cab unit and 3 boosters. Negotiation with the unions soon rectified the situation, but as the road's earliest units were geared for higher speeds than subsequent units, these sets continued to be composed of 1 FDA cab unit and 3 FDB boosters. This is why the road had 10 more FDB booster units than FDA cab units. See EMD 567 for specific information on the history of the 567 medium-speed 2-stroke cycle diesel engine, as employed in the FD and its many successors. Indiana, 1951. East. W. Kettering wrote a paper for the ASME entitled History and Development of the 567 Series General Motors Locomotive Engine, which goes into great detail about the technical obstacles that were encountered during the development of the 567 engine. FDs were generally marketed as semi-permanently coupled AB sets making a single locomotive of 2,700 horsepower. Many railroads used pairs of these sets back-to-back to make up a 4-unit ABB locomotive rated at 5,400 horsepower. Some railroads purchased semi-permanently coupled ABA 3-unit sets of 4,050 horsepower. All units in a consist could be run from 1 cab. Multiple unit control systems linked the units together. Some roads, like the initial customer Santa Fe, ordered all their FDs with regular couplers on both ends of each unit for added flexibility. This package included hostlock controls for B units, enabling these units to be operated independently of A units for moving within yard limits, and a 5th porthole was provided in the car body to enable the hostlock some measure of visibility. Internally, EMD referred to these units as Model FS. Engine and powertrain. The FD introduced a 16-cylinder version of the 567 series engine developing 1,350 horsepower at 800 revolutions per minute. Designed specifically for railroad locomotives, this supercharged 2-stroke 45-degree V-type, with an 8.5 in bore by 10 in stroke, giving 567 cubic inches displacement per cylinder, remained in production until 1966. A D8D-C generator provides power to 4 D7 traction motors, 2 on each truck, 1 on each axle, in ABB arrangement. The Blomberg design introduced here has been EMD's standard B truck, used with few exceptions through the F59 PHI of 1994. EMD has built all its own components since 1939. Only the 4 demonstrator FDs used the 567 UDEC engine. Those engines were replaced in the demonstrators by 567 volts DEC engines before sale to the Southern in May 1941. All FD locomotives built between December 1940 and February 1943 used the 567 volts DEC engine. The 567 volts DEC engine was replaced in production with the 567A engine in May 1943. All subsequent FD locomotives built from May 1943 to the end of production in November 1945 used the 567A engine. Body recognition and appearance. The FD is very similar to the later F units in appearance, but there are some differences which render it distinguishable from later EMD freight cab units. The side panels of the FD were different, but it was fairly common for railroads to alter them to make an earlier unit appear later. As-built FD units had 4 porthole windows spaced closely together along the sides, and B units with couplers on both ends had a 5th window in one side for the hostler position, if equipped with hostler controls. The roof is a more reliable indication. FDs had 4 exhaust stacks along the center line. The radiator fans were recessed within the car body and arranged in 2 pairs, one near each end of the locomotive. Later units have the fans grouped together and the shrouding extended atop the roof. The overhangs of the body past the trucks differ in the FD compared to later units. The B units of FDs ordered in semi-permanently coupled AB sets, and those with couplers on both ends, have a large overhang on one end featured on no other EMD B units. This is not present on the B units in semi-permanently coupled ABA sets, which were called FDS-B units. At other locations, except the cab front, the FD units have less of an overhang than later units. The trucks appear to be right at the ends of the car bodies. Unlike most railroad locomotives, the F-series used the body as a structural element, similar to a truss bridge. EMD has not repeated this construction, as the modern passenger engines have a non-structural cowl-type body. Wartime restrictions. During World War II, locomotive production was regulated by the War Production Board. The traditional locomotive builders were prohibited from building diesel road locomotives until early 1945. There were a few dual-service Alco DL109s for the New Haven. Steam locomotives could be built with fewer precious materials, and were the proven type of motive power at the time. It was also opportune for Eastern railroads to stick with coal-fired steam power while petroleum distribution to the East Coast was disrupted in early days of the U.S. war effort. EMD, however, was purely a diesel builder, and therefore was allowed to continue building diesel freight locomotives, except when fulfilling demands for 12-cylinder 567 engines for LSD vessels for the U.S. Navy. The WPB assigned the FDs to the railroads it deemed most able to benefit from the new locomotives. The Santa Fe received by far the largest allocation, given its heavy war traffic and the difficulty and expense of providing water for steam locomotives on its long desert stretches. The original ABBA demonstrator set was sold to the Southern Railway. Were it not for the wartime restrictions, many more FDs would have been built. Most railroads wanted diesels, but often had to settle for steam locomotives. Parenthetically, these wartime restrictions on other manufacturers' diesel programs helped ensure EMD's dominance of the post-war diesel market, as EMD exited the wartime restrictions with a fully mature diesel engine, while the other locomotive manufacturers took several years post-war to reach an equivalent level of maturity with the diesel engines, and several never reached maturity, and hence exited the locomotive market altogether. Subsequent models. The FD was discontinued in late 1945, replaced in production by the F2, which retained the 1,350 horsepower rating of the FD, but with upgraded electrical and control equipment. Additionally, the mechanically driven cooling fans, which required constant tending by the locomotive's firemen, were replaced with electrically driven fans which were automatically controlled, a system which is still in use to this day. The F2 was produced only in 1946, and afterward was replaced by updated models in the EMDF unit series, such as the F3, F7, and F9. Original buyers. Surviving units. Multiple EMD-FD units survive today. They include the leader unit from Demonstrator No. 103 displayed at the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri. The original A unit was presented to the museum in a June 27, 1961 ceremony. It is currently paired with one FDB unit. Both units are cosmetically restored and painted in the original GM demonstrator paint. However, only the A unit is from the original demonstrator set, which eventually went to work for Southern Railway. The two B units and the other A were eventually scrapped after years of service. The B unit, now on display at St. Louis, originally just a random FDB unit, was later stripped of its engine and other locomotive parts and converted to a boiler car. It later went to the museum in Virginia. In 1989, this former FDB unit as well as the genuine demonstrator A unit from St. Louis were repainted in the original demonstrator colors for a celebration at EMD for the 50th anniversary of the FD. They toured together and then were returned to their respective museum owners. An FDA unit, FSBC2203A, on display in Mexico, which was originally built for the Northern Pacific Railway. 3 B units from the Southern Railway are preserved. Number 960,604 is at the Southeastern Railway Museum in Duluth, Georgia, and number 960,602 is in Conway, South Carolina, and number 960,603 is at the Museum of Transportation in St. Louis, Missouri.